All of us are familiar with pain and suffering. We know what it is when we meet it, and we know it's bad. But perhaps somewhat surprisingly, we find goodness too. Moments of exhale where all is right, laughter among friends, the pleasure of an intimate moment, acts of kindness, and even mercy. We know what pain and suffering is, and we know it's bad. But what of goodness? At the end of the day, I think we can only understand goodness in relation to God. God is wholly good, without defect or blemish or lack. This perfect goodness is diffusive of itself, bubbling out into the creation of a good and beautiful world. As we read in Genesis 1, God saw all that He had made, and as the text says, it was good. Reflecting on God's good creation, especially as originally made, gives us insight into the nature of goodness. We can define goodness in terms of proper function. Good objects, or good people, or good actions are good if they function properly according to a design plan. A knife is good if it cuts well. A cookie is good if it tastes pleasant and sweet. A life is good if it functions how it ought to function. And an action is good if it's conducive to our flourishing. Chief among the questions we ask as humans, then, are what is goodness and how can we become good? To answer, I want to distinguish between what is sometimes called common and then uncommon goodness. Now, common goodness has to do with virtue. We become good when we become intellectually and morally virtuous. Through habit and effort and even prayers, we can become good human beings in this sense. But at the end of the day, there is what Mark Gould calls a massive frustration in this picture. For ultimately, through our own efforts, we fall well short of the moral ideal as embodied, for example, in Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. Now this is tragedy. This is bad news. On our own, we can't embody perfect or uncommon goodness. But this is also the beginning of the gospel story. Who would have foreseen that the answer to man's tragedy or moral imperfection is that God Himself took on a human nature so that ultimately we could become fully human by becoming one with God? Do you long for goodness? Do you want to be good? Then organize your life around the good that is God and find your hope, your meaning, and your identity in Jesus and the life that He offers.